It had now been almost 2 months since Damien and the unlikeliest of trios had arrived to this strange new world. And safe to say, Damien was making little to no progress. Of course, there was still Ty, who was also here at the academy along with him, although because he was the familiar of Siesta, and because Siesta had the status of a plebeian, she couldn't really offer him much new information or intel. So Ty mainly focused his times on helping Damien study in the library, and when he wasn't doing that, he was just with Siesta most of the time. And they were hitting it off well enough. There was no official label or anything like that, but even still, they had gotten comfortable enough to the point where he was meeting her extended family, that being her uncle and her cousin respectively. They were a nice group, her uncle running his own tavern, more on the flamboyant side of things, but still to each their own, and they liked him well enough. In the meantime, Saito spent his time guarding Henrietta at her castle, and he wasn't really in any rush to go back home. It wasn't so much that he didn't want to, but it was just that, in all honesty, he wasn't much of a hero in his world. He had just so happened to get the scarab and hadn't really done much with it. Plus, there were other heroes in his world, not just him alone, and crime in Japan wasn't really like that compared to the United States and other areas, so Saito didn't really see it as much of a big deal. That just left Damien by his lonesome. He spent his days studying or carrying out whatever task that Louise had for him, and before long, summer vacation ascended upon the students of Tristan Academy. Of course, many, being the students and children of nobility and royalty alike, would be returning home for the summer, taking a break from their studies, while few would still be staying on campus, Louise being one of them. In the midst of all of this, though, there was a bit of a discrepancy. It came in the form of Montmorency and her dealings with her sometimes faithful on-again, off-again love interest boyfriend of the week in Guiche. And, well, that mainly being in the form of, well, it was on-again, off-again. He had wandering eyes that roamed, but wherever he laid his wand was his own sort of vibe. And a long story short, she wanted to make sure that she would be his one and only. And as such, she chose to make a magic potion. Granted, that sort of thing is actually illegal in this world, primarily because any potion that deviates or tampers with someone's emotions is viewed as a humane violation. Damien actually read that in a book, and he honestly couldn't help but chuckle, laughing just because of the fact that he knew how he was created. So, safe to say, his mother technically broke international law. Although, in the end, who really was going to put her in jail, especially since she was dead? All the same, though, Damien had other problems. Because that love potion in particular did end up getting drank, but not by Guiche. No, it got drank by Louise, and she fell in love with the first person she saw, which just so happened to be Damien. Now Damien had more of an annoyance than ever before. Right now, he was trying to study and figure out a way to get home, and yet he couldn't because he had a pink-haired witch attached to him at the hip at every witch turn. Damien, I want you to give me attention. Louise, you're not in the right state of mind. Get off. No, I don't wanna. You're just gonna go look at other girls. I know you are. Oh, please. Mostly all of them have gone home at this point, and they weren't that much to look at while they were here. Liar. You miss Kershay and her big boobies, don't you? Oh, please. I've said it once and I'll say it 1,000 times. The mark of a woman is not by how big her bust size is. If that were really the criteria, then I would have met people that would have had her beat a long time ago. But Damien was going to keep that to himself. Besides the point, I look for other things. Like what? Whatever it is, I can be it. I can be anything you want. See? Louise would, start to strip, and Damien had to stop her. This was starting to get out of hand, and he had to get to the bottom of this. Thankfully, he caught up to Montmorency for her actions and was willing to blackmail her if she wasn't willing to give up an antidote. After all, what she'd done was punishable by jail time, and he had to know that prisons in this world would be a lot more harsher than the ones in Gotham. Trust me, he knew. It's not like the prisons in Gotham ever held anyone anyway. I mean, have you seen how many times the Joker breaks out of Arkham Asylum? I mean, he breaks out of there so much, you could probably write a book about how many times and how many ways he's escaped. Which, now that you think about it, if Arkham Asylum is run on Wayne Tech, then how the hell... You know what? No. There are some things that just don't need to be answered, and that's one of them. Although, if he ever did get home, he and his father were going to have a long talk about proper security, or lack thereof. In either case, what mainly mattered was getting Louise back under control, which was going to be easier said than done, because in order to do so, what they required were tears of a water elemental. So let me guess, Damien would say. This is one of those things where we need pure water of sorts to undo the magical harm that you've caused. I mean, when you put it like that, you make it sound like I poisoned them, Montmorency would say. Well, no, you've just created a bigger annoyance and inconvenience for me. Damien! Louise would jump on him out of nowhere, grabbing and holding on for dear life, reaching up and using her tiny little mouth to bite on his neck. Hey, stop that! Stop! Get off of me! Louise! No, don't you reach for down there! Hey, stop it! You caused this. Now, you're going to show me where that damn water elemental is so we can find a cure and get her back to normal. Fine. I can take you to where I know you can find one. I haven't been there since I was a kid. It's a lake. It's known as Lagadorian Lake. It's a place where I know the water spirit is said to be. All you need is just a small piece of her form, and it'll be enough to create the cure that you need. Good. We'll head there first thing in the morning. Ow! Safe to assume, Damien did not get much, if any, sleep that night. Louise was restless, her heart set aflame with a flutter of love that just couldn't be contained any further. The more she looked at Damien, though she looked at his chiseled features, his stern look on his face, the tired bags under his eyes whenever he took that green mask off, his dark jet black hair, the way the sword stood on its hilt, the way he looked inside of his Robin uniform with the cape fluttering in the wind, especially at night. And then there was the brooding. Oh God, the brooding. The way that he was able to brood, it was unlike anything she'd ever experienced in her life. Louise, she couldn't hide it any longer. The way that she was feeling for Damien was unlike anything she'd ever felt in her life. Was it the fact that he ignored her? The fact that he always pushed her away? What was it about a type of boy like that just drove a girl crazy? It was as if he hardly ever tried to give her any attention at all, yet even still, she remembered the few times that he did. It was just the little things that he would do for her, like doing her laundry without her even asking, or making sure that her books were ready for class, or helping her train after school and pushing her to do so well. He was so thoughtful and considerate. I mean, sure, in this world, he wasn't considered a noble, but in his world, who knows? I mean, he said he came from a family of fortune and fame, so would that qualify? It had to qualify, didn't it? I mean, he was just so damn perfect. Why wouldn't it qualify? She wanted him. She had to have him, but all the same, he just kept denying her, and yet the more he denied her, the more she wanted him further. She was willing to try anything, do anything. Sure, she couldn't beat the other girls when it came to the bust size, but she could do other things. She'd do anything he wanted. And she meant anything. It didn't matter. It could be on the floor, on the bed, on the table, on the rooftops. Okay, maybe not the rooftop. But then again, he had that grappling hook thingy. Maybe they could hang off the ceiling and, well, you see where this is going. So, safe to say, Damien, he didn't have the best of nights, and he was having even worse of a morning because Louise was continually holding on to him, even as they rode horseback, traveling throughout the land, eventually making their way to the sacred lake in question, where they were hoping to meet with this water spirit. But they would have to wait until nightfall, so all they could do was camp out and wait. Damien stoking a fire and cooking some of the food that they had brought along, and Louise sitting there happily as if she were just enjoying every little thing that he did. I mean, honestly, he wasn't even doing that much. This was one damn powerful potion. Although, if Damien had learned just a little more about the potion that was used on Louise, then he would come to learn that the potion didn't add any new feelings. It actually only amplified what was already in one's heart. It wasn't as complicated of a love spell as you might think. Of course, Damien wasn't fully aware of this, and Louise didn't know it also. But for anyone who was in the know, then the way Louise was acting would take on a whole new perspective. Eventually, though, nightfall would come, as they all stood there waiting, as Montmorency would soon raise her hands and summon the water spirit forth. As it emerged, the figure of a womanoid figure that was made of water would appear before them, explaining to them her dilemma. She couldn't just give them the sacred water that they were looking for, because she had her own ordeal, and that was dealing with some troubling magic users that had been disturbing her resting area. Damien would offer to deal with the trespassers in exchange for some of the sacred water, which would then lead to he and Guiche working together to deal with the hooded figures, which turned out to be both Tabitha and Kershay. Tabitha, who had come looking for some of the sacred water for her own behalf, and was looking for yet another form of source to try to figure out and how to stop the flooding that was occurring. Once they reconvened with the water spirit, they were able to make more sense of the situation. Apparently, the reason why Tabitha and Kershay had arrived in the first place was because the water spirit was flooding the land, and it was getting to the point where it was reaching Tabitha's home. So Tabitha had come here in an attempt to stop it. However, the reason why there was a flooding was because the water spirit needed to cover the entire land with water. This would allow her to travel freely, and she could find the treasure that she had lost. Damien would ask her to explain further what she was looking for, and apparently it was a magic ring, one that was stolen by someone by the name of Cromwell. She was hoping that by flooding the entire world with water, it would give her free range to travel, so she could eventually find the treasure that she had lost. You see, because water spirits and, well, nature spirits in general are immortal, their view of time is a lot different than that of a human. For them, they're in no particular rush to ever do anything, and for them, making a promise isn't really so difficult, primarily because what might be a long time for you is nothing more but a little blip for them. You could be gone for 50, 100, maybe even 200 years, and as long as you fulfill the promise, for them, it was like you had just gone off for a little stroll and came back. No skin off their bone, well, assuming if they even had skin or bone, because after all, they were spirits. But still, Damien would make the promise all the same. If all she wanted was an artifact, he was sure he could track it down. After all, he had the skills to do so. To the others, they thought that it was barbaric and idiotic for him to make such a promise. After all, he was nothing more but a mere plebeian, a user who couldn't even use magic. How on earth could he make a promise to a water spirit? And yet, surprisingly enough, the water spirit would accept his deal because he had the mark of Gandalf. Of course, upon hearing that, Damien wondered just what cheesy pickup was that. After all, he was familiar with the term and the legend of Gandalf, It had been used in so many books and movies it wasn't even funny. But when he was brought to attention of the ruin mark that was on his hand after taking off his glove, he soon realized that this is what they had been referring to this whole time. But yet, even still, it had to be a joke. There was no way that Gandalf was some real being. But of course, when he looked to the others, they only looked at him with a puzzling expression. Sure, they had heard the legendary tales of the great swordsman Gandalf, but the idea that Damien could actually have any relations to such a person, well, that was even more harder to believe, especially for Louise. But even still, the legend of the great swordsman Gandalf, Damien, an excellent swordsman in his own right, it seemed to go hand in hand, but still, what were the odds of that actually being true? This was yet another mystery that Damien had to look into. And if he had this mark, then what about Tai, as well as Saito? Did they also have special markings? And if they did, what did it all mean? Would this affect him if he made it back home? And after all, there was still his theory about this world being a nexus point in the multiverse, because it seemed as though multiple worlds could all converge in this one area. It only left him with more questions and answers, things that he'd have to figure out eventually. But for now, what they had come for, they were able to retrieve, getting the sacred water that they needed to create the antidote potion to help bring Louise back to her senses. And sure enough, once she did, she went on a full-blown tirade. She felt like she had been used, violated, as if the deepest and darkest machinations of her mind had finally been revealed, and what was worse, Damien had experienced all of it. But still, there was only so much the girl could do. It didn't matter how much she tried to kick, punch, and flail. Damien averted every attack she threw at him, before eventually finding herself being pinned to the bed with Damien on top, demanding that she get a hold of herself and calm down. Although, in the heat of the moment and in the feeling of that situation, the two found themselves only being inches apart face-wise. A glowing blush of red could be seen on the both of them, although when the door slightly turned open, Siesta being surprised to see the two of them in such a state, Damien would actually be caught off guard, eventually being kicked in the nads and rolling over to the ground. For the first time, Louise had actually managed to get a hit on him. Below the belt, but still, a win is a win, and sometimes no one really cares what you say after that. All the same though, they were happy to see that she was back to normal. Tai would have offered to come by and help them, but Damien didn't bother. Since he and Siesta were getting so close, he didn't want to intrude. Although, it did bring up another concern that was growing. They were getting too comfortable here, at least for Damien's liking. The more time passed, the more they were settling in, learning the language, the way of the people. They had adjusted to living life here as if they were going to stay here forever. That simply couldn't be the case. They had to go home eventually. They needed to. Of course, they all knew this, but still, in the back of their mind, they weren't really in such a rush. I mean, it wasn't like things were going for the best for them in their world. Not bad, but still. In this world, it felt like they had gotten a chance to start over, to experience things they might not have experienced if they had stayed home. So in the end, was there really a need to go back? Should they go back? Would they want to? All the same, Damien knew that he had to find a way. He knew that the others would be looking for him, so still, he had to try and help himself as best he could. It would be later on in the night, though, when a mysterious hooded figure, followed by another hooded figure, would make their way to Louise's window. Damien stood at the ready with his sword. However, he quickly put it back in its place, seeing that it was none other than Princess Henrietta, and by her side was a crestfallen Saito. I mean, it wasn't so much that Henrietta would notice, but still, Damien could pick up on the cues. Something was bothering him, although what, he couldn't entirely tell. As Damien and Louise would do a proper bow before the princess, she would assure them that that wasn't needed, but rather, she had come because she needed a favor. A situation that required the assistance of capable ones like Siesta, along with her familiar in Tai found the Green Lantern, and Louise and her familiar in Damien the Robin. The reason was because of an urgent matter that had appeared, a matter that, if not handled with care, could lead to the potential downfall of the country. Again, this was the last thing Damien needed, yet another situation where he found himself playing into the stakes of a world that he knew nothing of. But all the same, it wasn't something that he could turn down. And before he knew it, another adventure loomed around the corner as his journeys in the new world would continue. This concludes Familiar of Zero, Tales of the Robin. What If Robin Was Louise's Familiar? Season 1, Part 4. As always, if you enjoyed today's video and everything else that we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcasting that has to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video as we continue with What If Robin Was Louise's Familiar, Season 1, Part 5. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings, signing off, and I'll see you next time.